championing national, regional, Africa-wide, and continental dialogues, and facilitating university participation in the food system summits at all these levels. This, colleagues, ladies, and convening power to witness RUFORUM's full opportunity to once more welcome all of you to this Vice Chancellors Forum with the theme Towards a Common Voice from African Universities to the UN Food Systems Summit 2021. I thank you very much for your kind attention. I'm going to go right away and invite RUFORUM Board Chair, Professor George Kanyama Firi, Vice Chancellor of Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, to present his opening remarks. Professor. Professor is not there.
I think he has not yet joined.
Okay, he has not yet joined us. I think we can move on and invite Professor Adipala. Prof, are you ready?
Yes, Chair, yes, my deputy body chair, yes, colleagues from Cameroon and everyone, yes, I am ready.
Okay, Prof, let us hear from you. Present on background to the UN Food Systems Summit 2021 and the Vice Chancellors Forum consultations. Prof.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much, all the panelists. Thank you very much, all the participants. Colleagues, before I make my remarks, I would like to show a short documentary.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But to fragile effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. Forming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people by bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar,
provide us, the community, with stability
all year round, every month, every day of the week,
even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems, because together
we can build a just a resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, allow me to share my screen, then I make some remarks. Madam Chair, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a very great honor for me on behalf of my colleagues at the RUFORUM Secretariat to introduce our today's dialogue, which we have called the Vice Chancellors Forum Consultation on the UN Food Systems Summit 2021 dialogue. The basics behind this forum meeting has been articulated in the two documentaries that have been shown. But briefly, let me highlight the rationale for the UN Food Systems Summit. It is based on the recognition, particularly in terms of Africa, but globally, that the current food systems are not sustainable. Rather than having declining hunger, there is increased hunger and malnutrition across the continent. As such that in terms of delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals, it will not be possible without ending hunger and malnutrition, and without having sustainable and resilient climate-compatible agriculture and food systems. But to correct this will require collective actions. And interventions must be people-centered and based on human rights and social justice. In other words, the interventions must emphasize inclusivity in all actions in order to end zero hunger. As such, the UN Secretary General called for a UN Food Summit with the aim to launch new actions, solutions, and strategies to achieve healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable food systems. To do this, we need to create awareness and public discussion on how best to reform the food systems to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to collectively come out with some key principles that will guide our governments and institutions and indeed other stakeholders on how to leverage on their food system to support the Sustainable Development Goals. And for us in Africa, our Africa Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. We need to work collectively to generate key actions towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and issue a call for action at all levels, including us at universities, at our national governments, at regional levels, at Africa-wide level, and continentally on what we need to do to improve our food systems. But at the end of this, we also need to agree on a system for follow-up actions to ensure that the summit commitments and the commitments we are making today and in other forums are addressed, are followed up, and are implemented in such a way that we deliver on the commitments. To achieve the above, we need a series of dialogues, including one that we are in today, and all this will lead to the UN Summit Dialogue in October 2021. The process as set by the UN Summit is such that the United Nations Secretary General has appointed a special envoy to lead the global process. That special envoy is none other than one of us, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the former Minister of Agriculture in the Rwanda government and the current president of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. We appreciate the honor bestowed upon her and to us as Africans. Secondly, the Secretary General has set up a scientific group to guide the process. They have set up a series of deliverables that should come out of the dialogue. And to help follow up of this, he has set up 100 champions working globally to mobilize participation in the global dialogue and to help in the follow-up of the actions to be implemented. The dialogue involves 3 avenues. One, the dialogue at the member states level, such as the one that has been elaborated by our moderator, what is taking place in Cameroon, and it is taking place globally in different countries. I'm aware that it has taken place in Kenya, has taken place in South Africa. I know that DRC and others are going to have it. The second level is global dialogues, and we shall be engaging in part of those as I will elaborate separately. The third is to hold independent dialogues. That is the type that we are holding today. Lastly, there's a UN task force looking at what is coming out and how this can all be synthesized together. We are expected to deliberate on 5 core action points. 1, on how to ensure access to safe and nutritious food for all. Basically, how to end zero hunger, ensure there is access to the food and it's affordable and it's nutritious, and that the food is safe. Secondly, to ensure that we are operating in an enabling environment, that we cope up, look at the issue of the shifting food demands, as will be elaborated later, but importantly, that we must address the issue of reducing the food waste. The third element, how we must make sure that we maintain a good natural ecosystems. We need to make sure that we ensure the sustainability of the production systems. We rehabilitate the degraded ecosystems, particularly in terms of soil fertility. The fourth one is that we must involve inclusivity. How will we deliver this? This is some of the expectation we are supposed to deliver on. Finally, we need to look at the issue of resilience to vulnerabilities, shock, and stress. So how do we create economic resilience, social resilience, and environmental resilience? So as a network of universities across Africa, we decided to work together with our vice chancellors and various university leaders to participate in the UN food systems. Professor Lindiwe from South Africa, I want to thank you very much, because in 2006 in Maputo, you called upon African universities to be at the table of policy dialogue. What we are dealing with today is part of making sure that our voices as universities and our partners are heard in terms of policy design and implementation. So the Secretariat is working together with the African universities to encourage engagement of both member and non-member universities and other institutions to engage in the national, regional, continental, and global dialogue platforms. We are encouraging universities to discuss things at at their university levels, but also more importantly, participate in a national dialogue. I acknowledge with appreciation the active role University of Pretoria, the Egerton universities and others, and University of Abomey-Calavi and others are playing to facilitate dialogue within their universities and at national levels. We are also encouraging our universities to engage in dialogues organized by our other stakeholders. For example, we are participating in a dialogue organized by our partners, such as Agrinatura in Europe. Finally, there are various UN food system dialogues that have been organized, and we would like to participate in all of this as universities and with our partners. A key component of the dialogue on reforming any food system will be to deal with the issues of youth. As such, RUFORUM on the 1st of June is convening a global meeting of youth from across the globe, including Latin America, North America, Europe, the Middle East, the Far East, so that they collectively will dialogue and present their voices on what they see as the future of the food systems and what needs to be done. This will be followed on 2nd of June by a global meeting that RUFORUM has convened to bring in global networks of higher education, research institutions, and agricultural advisory services, such that we learn from each other what is happening with the American public and land grant universities, what is happening in Latin America, what is happening in India, China, and all this. And collectively, we then come with a voice that we will put forward to the United Nations General Assembly. An important part for which I have already mentioned, Lindiwe, you have played a very important role, is the engagement with policy and other key actors, because whatever we do, eventually these things need to feed into policy. So we are engaging at 4 levels. On the 27th of this month, RUFORUM, with the support of the government of Malawi, is convening a meeting of African government ministries, technocrats, so that we will present the outcomes of the deliberations of today to the technical experts, so that they could pick some of this into the national processes and into Africa-wide processes. Then on 9th of June, we will be convening a meeting of African ministers, so that the outcome of the meeting of the technical experts will be presented to African ministers for adoption at a continental-wide level. This will culminate in a meeting of senior African advocates for development. Some of those will include Professor Monty Jones, the first African food prize winner, World Food Prize winner. It will include others like the former president of Mauritius and the former president of Liberia, among others. Finally, on 1st of July, we are again working with the government of Malawi to convene a summit of heads of states to hear the outcomes of the deliberations that has come out through the various consultations that we as a university have engaged in at our own university, country level, sub-regional level, and globally, so that we communicate some recommendation to African heads of state. After this, and at the end of today, and which will be a key component of our deliberation, we will discuss a statement to be issued by African universities to the United Nations Food Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to your active participation in the dialogue. Thank you very much. I hand back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you so much. We have to end hunger and malnutrition, and collective action and inclusivity is a must. Thank you for highlighting what the UN food system aims to achieve. And we have already 2 questions I see in the question and answer box. We'll get to that as we move into our discussions. And I welcome all participants that have already sent goodwill messages on the chat box from Uganda, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Sudan, South Africa, India. We see all of you and thank you for participating. So we're going to move right on to the next speaker, and we welcome Dr. Patrick Okuri, ICRISAT Country Director, Malawi, who is going to present an overview of current status of food systems in Africa, key drivers, challenges, and needed interventions. Dr. Patrick Okuri, over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also thank you very much, distinguished participants, members of the forum's board, and everyone present, all protocol observed. I'm just going to walk you through some thoughts of what I think are critical for addressing this elephant in the room, which is Africa's predicament now, how to feed its people for the present and future posterity. I work for ICRISAT, I'm based in Malawi. All right, I'll just start by mentioning that about 2010 or earlier thereabout, it was projected that agriculture would be part of Africa's 2020 2.6 trillion economy if it was growing at about 5% annually, and it would create about annual revenue of about 500 million with a growth of about $220 billion. Now, this did not actually happen. This was projected at a time when Africa was growing collectively at about 4 to 5%, one of the highest growth rates at that time. And so everything looked very rosy. The UN summit, among others, seeks then to address what we could do as a global community to address different challenges that have affected us hitherto. And that includes, among others, the increasing limited access to food by different populations of the world. Now, the African Union also, and the rest of the development world have also the Agenda 2030, and Africa's Development Bank, the premier financing institution, has also set up in its strategy, which ends, I believe, in 2022, what it calls its big 5 priority areas. And as you can see on your screen, one of the issues is really feeding Africa. It's responding to a failed decade to get agriculture to successfully work and feed and employ the people of this continent. This slide is just a reminder of why the African Development Bank, the African Union, and all our governments and the rest of the globe thinks putting money in agriculture is worthwhile. What you note here is that if you look on your left, the percentage reduction in number of poor in relation to a 1% increase in yield, this works best in Africa. The rest of the regions, developing regions of the world, the ratio at which we reduce the number of poor people is way, way lower, especially in South America. For Africa, a 1% staple increase in yield could lift 2 million people out of poverty. And it has been noted that agriculture is about 2 to 4 times more effective to move people out of poverty if it could grow at least at 5% annually. So these were the arguments that are known, but we have not been able to deliver that. And I'll be explaining to you, just giving you an overview of that. Accordingly, the sustainable food systems become a framework to think about feeding our growing and complex demography in Africa here. And I thought that I would start by just reminding all of us what actually is a food system. Now, a food system is a complex of mostly 3 interacting areas. One is food production, The second is food processing, distribution, and marketing. That's the socioeconomics of it. And the third is what you get on your plate, the so-called farm to the fork. These three broad areas are influenced, number one, by the issues around environment health. What is the impact of pesticides and many other things related to the ecology. They are also affected by the extent to which people can be able to buy and access and utilize that food, so-called economic vitality. And then the social equity. This is about equitable access to all these different quality and quantity of food that we need. So taken together, what is really a food system looks at the interaction between those three inner areas, 1 to 3 marked on your slide, on that slide, as influenced by those outcome areas of environment, health, social equity, human health, and economic vitality. And for this to be effective and deliver on the promise of the SDGs and different other agendas, it's important that they are sustainable and or renewable. Accordingly, the UN sees a sustainable seed system as being related to the SDGs on the right side of your slide, and there are a number of them. I will not go into all of them. Now, feeding Africa is a bit more complicated than we would want to think. So in the middle of your panel there, you do have that part in light green. This is the standard food production to supply, in the middle to consumption. This part is what we generally talk about as the food supply chain. This food supply chain is influenced by a number of external drivers that many times are unbeknown to many of us, but actually they are there. They include things like demography, the policies available, the socioeconomics, the technology and science to process and package and increase shelf life, the geopolitics, the social cultural environment, and so on and so forth. And these in turn are also influenced by, they all interact and influence the extent to which the production to supply system works and ultimately contribute to how the broader economy is going to respond and all contribute to effectiveness and efficiency of the food system overall. So for Africa, this is very complicated given the diverse number of people that we have in Africa, the diverse peoples, rather, given the different production systems, very diverse consumption patterns, and so on and so forth. Now, feeding Africa also faces another challenge. It is just that most of the food in Africa is produced on less than 20 hectares, as you can see on the left of your panel. And if you look on the right of your panel, you'll notice that compared to the rest of the world, Africa uses just about 24 kilograms of fertilizers per hectare. This is way less than what other developing regions of the world like Asia would be using, almost 6 to 7 times less than that. And no wonder we have this conundrum. We have smallholder farmers who are using less technology, and that might explain in part why we are unable to effectively and efficiently feed our people. So those are the challenges that are there. It's happening. All right. Africa's production also takes place on very fragile production systems. And what you notice is this dark blue here. This is just a color-coded map. The blue parts are really the tropical rainforests, and then the brown here are the drier areas, whereas majority of Africa is within a tropical zone and would be less affected by climate, by drought and so on. You have a fairly large part of Africa where many people live that are actually very prone to weather variability. So you also do have a threat of frequent drought taking place. And along with that is the major threat of climate change. 23 out of 33 African countries will actually be prone to climate change. On the right side of that panel is you see what Africa needs to think very carefully about. Now, almost half of Africa depends on maize as a staple, but at the current rate, of our journey towards achieving a 1.8% temperature rise in temperature, we're going to lose up to 34% of the land area available for maize production if we continue at this rate. Technology can reduce that to about 18% maximum. What you will note for wheat and soybean is that the reduction, the impact of technology is not that much. And that tells you that the technologies in use are not exactly the best that we have here. These are crops that we're expanding their crop area, but clearly there's a lot of work we've got to do for them to reach the level of maize. Access is also another issue about African food systems. On your left panel, there are a series of countries. This is a study conducted in 2020, and it basically shows that most of our countries have a very high cereal import dependency ratio. The higher that proportion there, the more you are importing. Most African countries import at least half of the food they eat. There are just very few that you could put in the food secure zone. That is Ethiopia, Nigeria, a bit of Togo, a bit of South Africa, maybe Sierra Leone, a bit of Rwanda. But most of the other countries are importing most of the food they need, including those that have progressed economically into the low middle income countries like Kenya, which needs to import approximately 45% of the food it imports. On the right side of your panel is really the money we are spending annually on food imports. And you can see that we're spending a lot of money on rice and wheat. These are the foods, many of which we are not very well adapted to producing in Africa, and a lot of work has got to be done. Milk, we are also importing a lot of processed foods, palm oil, etc., etc. And so, again, Africa is spending more on importing what it needs to feed itself. Part of this is for industry, but most of this must go onto the plate. And this disconnect, a very high population, a high demand, and a high import ratio is something that needs to be looked at in order to stabilize food supply. The access is also affected by weak integration of farm to market subsystems. So you have the farmer in the center there, a lady with her hoe. She could be able to connect, for example, using different biometrical technologies or ICTs, but that doesn't necessarily work the way it is. She's disconnected from other users and other buyers of her products. And she's pretty disconnected from high-end science on the other side, like ICRISAT and in cooperatives. But this is something that could be improved if that connectivity was well addressed. So again, this is a challenge, but it is an opportunity that we could look at. More importantly, the future is not very promising for Africa. It looks like our progress towards 2030 is going to be a very subdued delivery of our key development targets. It's highly likely, going at the current rate, that we will not be able to end malnutrition in all its forms. It's also highly likely, unless we do something serious, that access to adequate food and healthy diets for all people all year round is not going to happen. And more importantly, if we continue with the losses that we have, I can't remember the numbers off my head, but Africa loses a significant amount of its food to post-harvest losses. And the graph on your right just tells you that if you compare us with the rest of the developing world, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and North Africa is much, much better than the rest of Africa. And South Africa is out of this list. It's also way, way better. Looks like North and East, it looks like the Maghreb, let me call it that way. Latin America is way better. You notice that we're just having a very little bump from where we were in 2015. And that's why we're going to expect very subdued progress. But the good thing is that these are forecast features. They are not necessarily the real thing unless we take action. So moving forward, what is expected of an African university? I thought that taking a food political economy perspective is very helpful. So at the lower side of your panel, you have the Sustainable Development Goals, and the purpose of every government is to be able to make food available, accessible, and utilizable by anyone. Now, for that to happen, you must have a very good food production to supply chain working. And but this food production it requires technologies. The food environment and marketing and access all requires value addition of different types. Then you have consumer behavior as populations change and adapt to new foods. It's going to affect the diets and ultimately the quality, the health outcomes that are going to come out of these food systems that are operational at whatever scale and scope. This middle part of your panel is actually affected by other external drivers for which we want to pay just a few more attention in the next few slides. The first one is that to produce food, we will need to think very careful about the biophysical and the environment drivers. And this includes things like national resources, capital, ecosystem services, climate change, diseases and pests, etc., etc. We also need to think about the next box, the STI, science, technology, and innovations to counteract the negative outcomes of our production environment and keep it going upwards. It's also important to note in the middle that the political economy is going to play a very fundamental role in how people can access and utilize the food that is being produced. The social cultural context will play a very big role. Where I work, people tell you if they have not eaten maize, they ain't eaten any food. Things like those affect how functional your food system is. And then of course you have the demographic drivers. As the economy grows and people change and people migrate, many things happen. So population growth can have a positive and a negative impact. And all these are silent energy that affects your middle part of the panel. So as a take-home message, the current food system, as mentioned by Prof. Adipala, are basically unsustainable. They are not providing enough food for everybody. In other words, they are also not equitable. So there are people going to bed hungrier, not just because of COVID. I didn't want to go into that. But in general, the number of people going to bed hungrier has increased globally and in Africa in particular. The problematic areas are really still around traditional areas of production. And this includes, of course, processing. There's the area of consumption, the qualities of what people are eating, food safety, and so on, and then nutrition. And I propose here that some major structural transformation is needed to deliver on the SDGs at different scale. So for universities, the vice chancellors, my leaders whom I'm talking to today, it's important to think careful about those 5 drivers I've talked about. I've just presented them differently. Actually, in all the outer ring, universities can play a big role. Through STI in the first role, through STI in the second role, through certain knowledge and policy in a social cultural context here and information, and also here through certain management and policy thrust and foresight information to help planning. In other words, STI and human capital is a key part for getting this whole thing stable and moving. Prof. Adipala has already provided this slide. I won't hazard myself into it, but I just wanted to highlight that just as you see this young lady here, this is one of my groundnut farmers taken somewhere in eastern Zambia. We need to think about input and output markets that are functional. We need to strengthen knowledge management systems across the board for different types of products and services that are needed. And more importantly, you need complementary human resources for both the STI, science, technology, and innovation, as well as entrepreneurship, turning science and knowledge into products and services. The main issue to note here is that Africa is not investing enough in agriculture. This study done by the World Bank Group basically shows that for many African countries, we are investing way less than what we expect out of agriculture. The outlier here is Southern Africa. And the main thing here is an AOI, the Agriculture Orientation Index of 1, means that the ratio at which you're giving in and getting out from agriculture is proportionate. So you can see Zimbabwe, Botswana, Malawi, these are the countries that are tending towards achieving unity. Majority of Africa are not investing sufficiently. And actually, if you get this and superimpose on the countries importing food, you realize it's actually the same picture. Less investment in agriculture, more food imports. It's known that STIs can catalyze agriculture productivity. We know that if we put money in agriculture and also the terms, the socio-economic, the political economy, we'll be able to up productivity of the sector by almost 70%. But many of our governments are putting money on defense, number 8, you can see almost 18%. They're putting money on health, they're putting money on farmer education. These things are all good, but they give you less than 25%. Right. And then finally here, we also know that if we want to change the current trend and improve the trajectory positively, to the extent that Africa could produce 2 to 3 times more cereal, if it intensified its agriculture, STIs are necessary. So for example, we need using improved materials, we could up our cereal production to 350 million tons. But land expansion will only get us 25 million, and that's what many countries are doing. That's not a helpful idea. Land expansion, if you combine that with improved materials, you almost triple that amount. And if you add post-harvest losses, you add another 50 million metric tons of cereal. And so you can see overall, just by using S&T, you can be able to up our productivity by 155%. And this is why universities play a very fundamental role, because I view universities, in my opinion, as large research centers that generate knowledge and the human resource. They have that advantage. The other thing about agriculture is that it could create different value-added products from the same agricultural thing. And this could create jobs, income. And again, the universities are the best place where you'll get all kinds of human capital and intelligence to develop all these products to diversify the economy and stabilize people's income in order to pay for food. Now, as African universities, I think that a comprehensive approach for improving African food systems is what we need. And there are 3 key areas that we need to think about. The first one is a pretty radical one, is a structural reform into the way we do our food systems and think about all of that. So there's need to reconfigure the focus, the delivery and management of especially core entities related to agri-food economy. For example, we need to think about a one world, one health, one common future. The agriculture, the vet, the environment and the health all need to be working very collectively to deliver on the same impact on the same person. But there is a challenge of financing. We don't have that much private equity in African finance. Yet private equity could actually help African universities to take out innovation sitting on the bench or in people's brains on paper, turning them into value. So these are things that we want to think about, structural reform. The other way is looking at how universities relate to other entities. Using partnership, for example, like RUFORUM, strategic partnerships could be leveraged. And these would help to address, for example, very comprehensive human capital programming to balance the current pyramid. Africa has a very asymmetric ratio of scientists to development impact, let alone the technicians that are necessary to get things delivered at appropriate scale and scope. These types of things require very strategic leadership. And then you have a lot of experience across all of your universities. I think Africa needs to move towards leveraging on its centers of leadership, for example, for food security, where Professor Majele comes from, intensification, climate change, and so on. We should not create too many of these things. We should use this to create a common future for Africa. And then where the rubber meets the road, the functional dimension, this is how we teach. How do we do research? What kind of research do we do? Make sure it is more intensified, engagement with impact actors to take up the technology. And more importantly, Africa should be advised by African institutions. The African University should be the think tank of Africa. Africa should increasingly decrease on being advised by consultants out of the region. Rather, those consultants should work with African institutions to drive its own agenda. And this is what it would look like. If we did that, we would be able to have STI and IP pipelines for industry. Africa would begin generating its own solutions for itself. We would be able to balance our STI pyramid and reduce the ratio of scientists to development impact that is working through TVET's undergraduate and graduate education. This would help us, for example, to improve the rate at which we engage in STI and new knowledge generation and how we work across different complex platforms. And more importantly, it would help us as well contribute to improving the economy and the impact of the STI, especially if we are all working collectively to solve the same problem. So finally, I think as a shared future, if we can take some of these thoughts, it will be possible for Africa to create renewable wealth production systems, which are badly needed now. Two, it will be possible to feed a growing population, and more importantly, create jobs and opportunity. All these are different facets of addressing the question of a sustainable food system. We are always threatened by this large number of people coming on board in Africa, but actually the truth is not very many of these. It is actually an opportunity if we can be able to do some of the things that I have talked about or suggested. So finally, as a takeaway message, there are just three things I want you to remember. One, there will be need to strengthen Africa food production to consumption fundamentals, and the STIs are critical. You would need improved breeds that are resilient. We will need to think about reducing post-harvest losses. Again, the food science and technology and all kinds of innovation are necessary. Thinking about production systems that are renewable and resilient to climate change for today and posterity. Thinking about efficient and effective knowledge generation and delivery systems, including advisory services, and many others. The second part, which is really the core of universities, is about human capital development for a flourishing food system. We need to balance our human resource pyramid for research and entrepreneurship. We need to leverage, and we need to think about leverage and convergence rather than competition in how we do our research and human capital development. And finally, as I mentioned before, Africa needs to depend upon its intelligentsia to inform its foresight and strategy for investment planning, for measurement, accountability, and learning to inform any investments and redesign of adaptation measures. Africa really must do that, and universities are the best placed institutions to do that. With that, Madam Chair, I yield. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patrick Okuri. You've given us the take-home messages already, but I'll just want you to hear some of the comments about your presentation. Knowledgeable, competitive, holistic, valuable, informative. Congratulations, Dr. Okuri. Thank you for a job well done. So now we are going to go immediately into the open discussion. And already there are 10 questions in the Q&A box. I will quickly read the questions to you, Dr. Okuri. The first from Srinivasa Konoto. What are the steps taken to improve and maintain land and water resources quality and quantity in furtherance of food production in density and diversity? This question actually came just when we started, even before your presentation. Another question that came before your presentation, again, from the same person: what is the extent of land earmarked exclusively for crop production to meet animal and human needs in Africa? The other question: what is the extent of land under organic agriculture in South Africa? And then we also have, I would like to know some of the projects that RUFORUM has done to engage the youth. I guess that's a general question to RUFORUM and university students, because we would really like to be part of this development strategy. A question from James Kashuboruzi from Uganda. No, he just is a comment. Is there a possibility for better economy in Africa? That is exchange of materials produced in Africa for food from other nations? What steps are needed to improve food diversity? African production and consumption of fruit and vegetables does not meet current needs of population. Improved yields alone won't solve malnutrition problems. From Mina Woruru, wonderful present. Kindly share your present. Okay, we are going to share the slides. All slides will be shared out to participants. How can our various African traditional practices and foods contribute to the improvement of the food systems at different levels? From Tandy Hamaibo. We need to put more efforts and potentials. Okay, that's a comment. Can you comment how African universities can contribute towards better nutrition outcomes through improving diets, especially in those countries in which a double burden of malnutrition is a concern? I think budget making is a political process. Thus, less than 5% of the budget is given to agriculture. How can you advise government to rely on experts rather than being political? The last one here from Nelson Koluswa. What can we do about foods that are forgotten or underutilized, yet we are hungry? I had to read all of those in case there are repetitions so that maybe you would hear and then know how to respond. If you want, I could take some over again. So Dr. Okuri and any other member in the panel, you can feel free so we start this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will start with the question here. I think it's the last one by James. There are a few questions related to diversity by James and Nelson. I think there are two issues that are necessary. Number one, most of our African foods are still eaten and consumed the way they used to be. And the context in which people are living in urban centers is drastically changing. And this is where food science and technology plays a virtual role. A good example is the rice cooker. Before the rice cooker was invented by the Japanese just over 60 years ago, you would struggle to eat rice. Today, anybody can cook rice, anybody can handle rice. Promotion of a simple technology like that of steaming rice just revolutionized the way we eat and consume rice today. And this is the same thing we need to think about our African food. There is certainly value in them, but a very fundamental role is to conduct the necessary STI to produce the types of products that will maintain the flavor, the likability to the consuming publics. I strongly believe African foods, minor as they are, can play a big role. Teff is another example that is very minor crop. Today, it is a major global crop actually for export, mostly because of food science and technology. And so it is basically traded by Nestle to deal with for feeding children that are sensitive to gluten and many other types of food. So in short, there is a lot of scope for addressing diversity, but all of this has to be anchored on science, technology, and innovation done by African universities for an audience, in Africa here for an audience that is already familiar with the type of food. Can African universities contribute to the nutrition agenda? They sure can. Indeed, many African universities are opening up nutrition programs. Many of these programs are less than a decade. And so they still need to train a lot of nutrition expertise to help in the advice at policy level, but you certainly need them to influence the whole value chain of the human resources that are needed to drive the agenda. That's just part of it. That must be coupled with the foods and how they're produced and how they're marketed, and addressing the issues of access, equity, quality, and quantity. So it's a bit of a complex role, but the African University has a fundamental point on the technology and the human capital that is needed. Then there was an issue about programs for the youth. Professor Dipala will address that. How much land do we have earmarked for production in Africa? I really don't have the numbers off my head, but I just wanted to note that Africa has 60% of the remaining land for production. I think a study by McKinsey and Company last year or 2019 shows that whereas we have all this much land available, we actually don't need to use all of it. The lungs of the world like Congo don't have to be cut down. But there's plenty of land in certain countries, just 4 countries, but Tanzania, Mozambique, a bit of Nigeria and Ethiopia alone. If effectively managed, and a bit of DR Congo, you'll be able to cut down the amount of food cereal imports drastically. And this is the argument behind the free common trade area in Africa, to enable to ease the movement of person and good. So I don't have the numbers, but I just want to let you know that there is, not every country has this land, but we have certain places where there are expanses of land available for increasing production without necessarily degrading the environment. I think I will leave it at that for now. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okuri. Professor Adipala, there was a question on the youth. I don't know if you're ready to answer that. And I think, let me just see if we have more questions here. What can we do about foods that are forgotten or underutilized, yet we are hungry?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I did respond to that. Most of these are vegetables, and it's about, again, improving. You need 2 issues. That one of them is completely out of our hand. The second is in our hand. We need to find a way of improving the shelf life of these commodities. For example, just by improving the shelf life of vegetables and roots and tubers through waxing, you will be able to drastically cut down the losses that take place from the field to the supermarket. By increasing refrigeration, this requires also sometimes breeding technology. Again, you have to breed for cold tolerance so that these things are not do not go through freeze injuries. Most vegetables are prone to that. So there is a bit of upstream work that needs to be done, but there is also downstream work that can be done, including testing and developing different products that could help to increase the shelf life of most of these foods, especially in the urban centers. So I think that's what is necessary. Now, the other one is, of course, improvement of infrastructure. And this is the dilemma Africa faces. Whenever we talk about investment in agriculture, including that 5%, most of it is actually spent on so-called, on development of infrastructure like roads and things like that. They come through so-called non-conditional grants by the World Bank and many other Brentwood institutions for developing infrastructure to improve transportation. They rarely touch on the core of actually the products that are there. And that is why we have this asymmetry. The roads can be very good, but then the material is sensitive to freezing. And that is the area where S&T has to play a role. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you too. There is a question here. One major problem we face in Africa is the reluctance to adopt genetically modified foods. How can we change perceptions so that we adopt technologies that can enable us to feed our people?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have, I have an answer, but it would be very biased. But let me just be frank. GMOs, there are different types of GMOs, and the most modern GMOs are actually difficult to even detect that they're GMOs in themselves. I think there are two issues we need to look at. If you look at the Euro indicator, I forget what it is, but it talks about how science and technology, the influences people's perceptions. And what it clearly shows is the more people learn about things, it doesn't mean they are going to accept them. And the vaccine is a good example also. So whereas we can continue on talking about the benefits of these GMOs, this is why education plays a very fundamental role. If the science education is very much integrated across different levels, people begin to learn that GMOs are actually not strange things. They're just speeded up evolutionary processes for developing solutions like nature would have done so. So I think it's a long-term solution. It's not a short-term solution, but it requires the fundamental role of universities reshaping how we train, how we teach, and how we do research. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Victoria's hand is up. Please, Professor Victoria, you have a question? Professor Victoria? Okay, we're going to...
Professor, Madam Chair, may I make just a quick response on the youth?
To move on, please, and go ahead, Professor.
Hello?
Go ahead, Professor.
With respect to the youth, I would like to make basically two comments. I think one, in terms of what we can do, is that we need to give an early exposure to the youth, especially even at the early stage of their education, so that they see the value of agriculture, so that they see that actually you can turn agriculture into business, so that they begin to see the opportunities at an early age, that there's value in terms of livelihood opportunity, and more importantly, that you can actually begin to turn some of the activities they're seeing at that level into business opportunity. Second, we need to analyze the different value chains and try to identify those points in the value chains which will be attractive to the youth. It will vary depending on the value chain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There are other questions that keep coming in, and I hope Dr. Okuri can answer this, send the answers in the question answer box so that we can move on. We would like to welcome RUFORUM's board chair. He's online and we'll like to hear his opening remarks. Welcome, Professor Kanyama.
I'm so sorry. I thought I was in, the time was in Southern Africa. So I missed the few, but I was able to follow Professor Okori's very robust presentation. Apologies for that late entry. Moderator? Can you hear me? Thank you. Would you like me to say a few words?
Definitely. We want
what
to
was missed. Thank you very much. Let me once again thank you all for enthusiastically participating in this particular Zoom. I will just spend a few minutes on the issues that are contained in my presentation. First of all, Let me appreciate the Deputy RUFORUM Board Chair in your own capacity as such, and also recognize my distinguished Vice Chancellors throughout the Africa region, particularly those within the consortium of the RUFORUM, and also recognize our ES for the Secretariat, and all protocols observed. Let me bring to you greetings from Luana, which stands for Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, to which I am its Vice Chancellor. I thank the RUFORUM Board, Deputy Board Chair, and all Vice Chancellors, and particularly for your patience to wait for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here motivated by the fact that Africa needs to be food secure, and indeed African universities are well poised to assist in the alleviation of food hunger in this continent. And also, without food, any country in Africa is a humiliation. We cannot afford to be without food, and none of us can function without food. Therefore, people of all ages, race, socioeconomic status, and everywhere have a stake in food systems in one way or the other. As universities, our communities, nations, and the world at large expect us to continue to develop the requisite human capital, produce and disseminate appropriate technologies, and generate the required knowledge in order to support sound policies and economic development for a healthy and food and nutritionally secure populace. We are expected to envision future trends and guide policy design accordingly. But to do so effectively, we need to partner and engage collaborative initiatives and design response strategies and initiatives. We must, and I repeat, we must therefore be part and parcel of policy dialogue and policy formulation. This is the rationale for our engagement and in the United Nations Food Systems Summit 2021 dialogue. Fellow Vice Chancellors, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to congratulate you for the progress that has so far been made and the contributions of our universities that are making towards training, research, and outreach. However, the world is calling on us today to have a complete mindset change that will allow us to be part of a transformational agenda towards improved food systems in Africa. It is now upon us to introspect and identify the needed change and the required resources, partnerships, and identify the needed change and required resources. And also to make sure that the systems, processes, and skills are in place. Vice Chancellors, ladies and gentlemen, the hour has come for the voice of universities to become louder and clearer and indeed be heard. This forum this afternoon provides us an opportunity to have a collective voice as African universities and to once more seek answers to the questions. For example, what should governments do to change the current course of our food systems and shape the future for better economies? The second question, how can universities ensure that youth consider food systems as value chain with opportunities beyond production and further recognize that agriculture can be cool? Third, what opportunities and potentials exist to change the spectrum of agriculture as we know it for the youth and through research and development, production of technologies and ICT tools? Another question, how best can we build adaptation, resilience, capacity of our smallholder farmers, the backbone of our food and nutrition security, and backbone of our economy? Another question, what should be done to ensure that Africa has the required capacities and skills to support our development agenda and the human and institutional capacities to respond to current and future challenges, especially climate change and natural resource degradation? Another question, how do we add value to our products and improve nutritional status of our people? The United Nations Food Systems Summit, ladies and gentlemen, reminds us that transforming our food systems is among the most powerful ways to change course and make progress towards all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It is my sincere hope that this dialogue will bring out all the relevant issues that can then be escalated to the national, regional, and global levels for improved livelihoods and development. Let me take this opportunity to thank all of you that are in this dialogue and who are participating in other United Nations Food Systems Summit 2021 dialogues. I believe that universities have to be the center of the discussion for transforming food systems, and that we who are in this meeting are indeed better placed to advocate for full participation. I therefore urge you to fully participate in today's discussion, which has already started, towards a common voice from African universities to the UN Food Systems Summit 2021 and other food systems dialogue. Distinguished Vice Chancellors, ladies and gentlemen, as I close, allow me also to echo on behalf of all our universities, congratulations to Professor Adipala Ekwamu, the Executive Secretary of RUFORUM, for his selection as one of the 100 champions for this UN food systems. In fact, these congratulations are way overdue. With these few remarks, belated with apologies, I thank you and wish you fruitful deliberations. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much, our board chair. Good to see you. Thank you for your remarks. And we now get to the next speaker. As a matter of fact, we have two speakers for the next 20 minutes. Each one of them have 10 minutes each. So we will begin with Dr. Nadia Fanyu-Foyne from the University of Abomey Calavi, Benin, and she's going to present on highlights of Eastern, Southern, and West African consultations on pre-UN Food Systems Summit Dialogue. Over to you, Dr. Nadia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me see, can you see my screen? I'm sharing my screen now. So distinguished speakers, Madam Chair, I am honored to and pleased to be the voice of the Eastern and Southern and Western Africa in this important forum to present the updates of the regional consultations on the upcoming United Nations Food Systems Summit Dialogue. I'm an associate professor in human nutrition and food system at the University of Abomey Calavi in Benin. So my presentation will be more a summary and an overview because the discussions in these three events were very fruitful and we got lots of relevant and interesting questions from the participants. So for example, in West Africa, there were over 150 participants for over 20 countries. So having said that, my speech will be delivered in three main points: the emerging issues in the three regions, what needs to be done and focus on priorities, and what universities should do. So heading to Eastern Africa, as Dr. Okori has shown, food system is complex with intricate components and drivers such as the supply chains, the environment, the food environment, the consumer environment, and so on. And we also have different types of food systems at global level, country level, and even at country level, we have the traditional food system, we have modern food system, and also different local food systems. So each region has tried to highlight the most challenges facing the food system in his region. So in Eastern Africa, the main challenges were highlighted regarding were the low and unsteady access of food, and also low and unsteady availability of foods. They also, Eastern Africa also faced the triple burden of malnutrition. And regarding, for example, the economic environment, they face the low and unequitable access to markets. They also have the challenges of weak governance between public and private sectors, sociocultural challenges, and environmental drivers, challenges such as pollution, low use of the biodiversity. But in Eastern Africa, we have also come up with some opportunities to face those challenges, such as the changing consumer habits due to increasing income and food choices, increasing availability of assorted agricultural science, technology, and innovation, expanding market access and trades, increasing agricultural digitalization via access to smartphones, the heightened national and regional policy dialogues. We have also enhanced engagement with regional economic communities, increased attention to South Central and South Africa for intervention, for wide intervention, and also improving networks with partners. As for West African region, we After years of strong growth, we have noticed that the per capita food availability is declining. So this is due to the pressure from demand sides and also from supply sides. So the point is now that after some years of growth, the hunger is increasing due to the increasing human population, but also the existing challenges of the persistent hungers and the lack of preparedness to shocks. And we also get the increased gap between research and impact that leads to the weak performance of our food systems. So for West Africa, there was also unprecedented convergence of multiple disruptors, such as the armed conflicts, the climate change, the changing diets, the environmental degradation, global health crisis. So all those disruptors, all those challenges led to increasing insecurity, undermining the development efforts, adverse effects on farming systems, and adding to that, the recent COVID pandemic that has constrained the usual operations within the agri-food system. This has been observed in most of the regions. So we are really unprepared to face this kind of shock and this kind of unknown and unplanned events. As for Southern Africa, this region has multiple of drivers across the value chain. So the first notice is that they have a diversity of food systems. So but they can be this diversity can be split into two. So we have two concomitant food systems: the commercial food system evolving with the subsistence food system. The commercial food system has its formal supply chain, for example, the maize, the production, distribution with even existing food reserves in some countries. And this serves the urban markets that meets the standards with really standardized phytosanitary products. And those products are also conform to the standards and define the way the food should be delivered. Beside those commercial food system, there is a subsistence food system who is critical and important because it is led by the rural population and it depends at 100% to the rural population. So this food system face nutritional quality challenges, more about availability, steady of access, and in terms of quantity, in terms of quality of the food. And this system is very fragile owing to its rain-fed dependence. So Southern Africa region have been food insecure for a long time, and COVID pandemic is making this situation more complicated, as I said. And 52 million of people are really food insecure in Southern Africa. The food system in this region is under siege from different conditions: drought, climate change, technology usage, the technology deployment limited, and yield gap between field trials and farmers' garden, policy constraints. So all those needs to evolve and to opportunity, using opportunity to make the change. As we can see, I mean, the percentage of malnutrition is high in some countries, and regarding the projection, it's going to increase. So for example, in Kenya, from 10% to 13%, in Ethiopia for 16% to 22%. So in most of African region, the malnutrition rates and food insecurity rate, acute food insecurity rate is projected to increase in 2021. So what do we need to do to reverse those rates? We need to understand our obstacle, right, as we are doing right now. I mean, trying to understand what is going on in our food system, to understand the drivers, and to understand the constraint, to understand in terms of quality, in terms of also social challenges. So we also need to reorient our effort to maximize the benefits of available technologies. We are not using the available technology. We are not really 5 to 10% of our technologies are really used. So we need to make effort to take advantage from those existing technologies. We need to continue efforts for sustainable production and consumption. Also, we need to address post-harvest losses. Post-harvest losses is a really high burden in our agriculture, especially in the subsistence food system. We did not control the post-harvest, so the losses are very high. We need to address non-agricultural factors such as the management of economy, issues of youth. We have been talking about it a few minutes ago. And the problem of governance needs to be addressed. We need also to focus on smallholder farmers to enable them to access inputs and technologies. I've said that in the commercial food systems, this is not only in southern region, and also in eastern and in western region, we have this subsistence food system who is not controlled, in which the farmers do not have access to inputs to technology. So we need to work on that issue so that the small farmers, who are the major part of our agriculture, we need to work to enable them to access inputs and technologies. We need to work on policies that help to address issues of trade and food distribution. Food distribution is one of the weakest, in one of the worst, let's say, chain of our food system. So we need to work on the food distribution. Research and innovation to cover drought tolerance, insurance scheme for drought based on shocks. How do we address the unexpected shock? So we need to get prepared to face the shock. We need also to deal with the education system at country level and also at regional level. We need to increase the quality of our education system, not only at country level, but also at quality assurance across region needs to be worked upon. The value addition and processing to address post-harvest losses to increase the final prices of the product. So we also need to address, not but not least, we need to address the infrastructures to have a road of connectivity, especially in rural areas, to unlock the potential of rural farmers. We are going in the air. We are in the era of technology, and when you go to the rural area, you can see the farmers who have their phone. So we can use these channels to unlock the potential of our rural farmers. So regarding all those, among all those points, on which one should we put focus on? We need to increase our attention on local economy through local staple foods, local resources and crops, and value addition in the agri-food systems. We need to promote the farmer-centric approach for better adoption of our innovations. Partnership among various actors is key. So this is through multi-stakeholder platform for synergic action. We do no more need silo. Action is silo. We need to have synergetic action where every partner benefits from each other. We need to limit food importation and develop better tools and technology to beat our potential. And we need to have affirmative action for better land policy that consider women and youth. In many parts of our countries and our region, women and youth do not have access to land. And land policy and land governance is a capital issue for the small holders. So where do we need to engage?
Professor Faulkner, you please round up. We are caught on time, please.
Sorry?
You need to round up. We are caught on time.
Yeah. I'm finished actually. I'm getting to the last one. So yeah, I've highlighted the most important points in the focus, but let me go to what the science, what the academia should focus on. We need to build a strategy to transform our food system. So increase locally and relevant research to create and adapt knowledge to strengthen our value chains. We need to support from science side, research and science side, we need to support multi-stakeholder platforms to innovate and scale to improve food and nutrition security. And most importantly, to improve communication, storing and sharing advances and approaches and make them accessible to policymakers from farm to table. With that, I will thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, participants.
Thank you so much, Professor Faulkner, for highlighting what we need to do to mitigate malnutrition and food insecurity in Africa. I will go ahead and introduce Professor Lindewe Majeli Sibanda from the University of Pretoria, Center of Excellence in Food Systems Studies, to make her presentation on towards the UN Food Systems Summit 2021 emerging issues. And Prof, you have 10 minutes. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and greetings to all the colleagues. I'm honored to be presenting on the journey towards the UN Food Systems Summit 2021 and highlighting emerging issues that came from a dialogue that was convened by the University of Pretoria. I'm here not speaking for the University of Pretoria, but speaking on behalf of the University of Ghana and University of Nairobi, who are the collaborating partners in the Arua Center of Excellence in Sustainable Food Systems. I'm trying to get the slides to move. So now, this dialogue was held on 9-10 March, some 2 months ago. And as you can see, we had an outstanding participation from Vice Chancellors, 454 delegates, mainly coming from our universities in North, East, West, and Southern Africa. Vice Chancellor Kupe was the convener of the dialogue, and he's the ambassador who will take our messages to the UN Food Systems Summit. And what I'm presenting has already been submitted. And I was co-curator with Professor Barend Erasmus. Now, we asked our Vice Chancellors, we are introspecting, what are the constraints that you face in the food systems agenda within the university? What are the opportunities and what partnerships would you like to see? On constraints, coordination, multi-level governance was highlighted as a major challenge. The issue of no organized structures for linkages between the different actors. Any faculty, any department does what it wants, and there's no proper coordination in the food systems agenda. The lack of coherent linkages amongst stakeholders and uncoordinated resource mobilization. We seem to be competing amongst each other to find resources instead of partnering. So the issue of funding, it's also inadequate in terms of what we have to do, particularly research. And generally, the lack of public funding opportunities does not give us power for leveraging. When it comes to training, there is lack of hands-on training for our students in the food systems arena, and lack of knowledge on food systems as a whole. It's a new term we've come up with, from farm to fork, but some people still see the silo of just farming or just agriculture without looking at the whole value chain. We were clear that the youth are restless. They want to get into food systems chain, but the entry opportunities are obscure. Climate change is creating a challenge, and generally universities have been left behind. They are not seen as major players. And thanks to the UN Food Systems Summit, thanks to people like Professor Adipala and RUFORUM and other partners who have curated food systems dialogues, we are now visible. What are the opportunities? In terms of opportunities, the emerging structures are creating opportunities for change through fora such as the partnerships, RUFORUM, the Center of Excellence in Sustainable Food Systems, the consultative group of international agriculture research centers who have come together to form one CGIAR and are also cognizant that they need partners such as universities in addition to the national agriculture research systems who were their traditional partners. There's also been some attempts by some universities and colleges to partner South-South and North-South, and also to partner with industry. We also identified opportunities where there have been traditionally leakages in the food system, and we've been able to bring not just the faculties of agriculture, but faculties of arts, faculties of engineering to push transdisciplinarity in the work that we do. This is because we now realize that we had forgotten that when we address the issue of food systems, we are addressing societal problems, and societal problems start bottom up. They start with a farmer who says, how can I access affordable, nutritious food? They start with a farmer who says, I want to have a diverse nutrient plate. How can I make it affordable? And they start with consumers who look at how can we access the food even during instances such as lockdowns. So universities are now cognizant that unless as Africa, we start from the societal problems, breaking the science from the laboratory to the policymaker is always going to be a challenge. Now, on the question of partnerships, who or what partnerships do we need? We are aware that Sustainable Development Goal number 17 is about partnerships, and that the issue of food systems touches on all 17 goals. But SDG 17 is not a mistake that it's the last one. It's one of the most important. No one can do it alone. No one can achieve SDGs by 2030 alone. We need partners. So the university vice chancellors introspected on what partners do we need? Private sector, government, both at national, regional, and global level. We need South-South, North-South, so that we enrich the knowledge system. And the critical thing in this partnership is that there's got to be shared value. Every partner, every stakeholder should see a benefit and also a contribution that they bring to the partnership. So equity came up as being one of the important things. And really, let's not go out to look for partners and forget our rural folk, the farmers. Universities should look at the land grant model of universities that serve their local communities. The issue of impact of these partnerships, we need metrics to measure the impact. Then there was the issue of governance. Our university systems are slow to respond. There is a culture of meeting over meeting on the same agenda and no radical changes or no seizing of opportunities for change. So the vice chancellors called that out, and said university councils, the governance systems need to introspect on what is it that we should be doing differently so as not to be left behind. The structures have to be made responsive to the issues of food system challenges, and there are generally weak policies in our institutions on who we partner with, how we partner and collaborate. We are used to our siloed disciplines, but those have to be broken, not only intra-university, but also outside the traditional partners. Then there was the issue of political influence. Most universities are public institutions. We need to align the policies of governance to enable opening up partnerships that are win-win for our institutions. There was the issue of skills. Can we look at our curricula as universities? Entrepreneurship should be the engine right from the onset as we deliver our teaching materials. Knowledge on sustainability is lacking. It's seen as a new buzzword, but for Africa, it should have been integral in everything that we do. So we need to be teaching hard and soft skills. We need to be expanding our applied research, but also creating multi-stakeholder transdisciplinary environments for our research students. But most important, whatever we do has to inform policy, and it starts from the university. So 7 key messages that we took to the UN Food Systems Summit by end of April is that we need to make sure that we're developing sustainable diets by taking an integrated food systems approach that cuts across health and well-being. We need an enabling transformative environment so that we work towards a healthy diet and good nutrition. We need a good understanding of food production utilization, covering the full cycle of efficacy, sustainability, climate risks, and the diversity of resources that we have in Africa. We need to be capitalizing on opportunities as universities and addressing the linkages between food, nutrition, energy, water, and food waste. But we need to be promoting opportunities for science policy interface. Long gone are the days where we do research, we talk amongst ourselves. We need to get out there into public fora, as we've done through these dialogues, to be informing the policy cycles. But most important, we need to be consolidating, coordinating both at national, regional, and international level. That's why it's been so good working with RUFORUM, that we are bringing lessons from other dialogues into this dialogue so that we amplify the voices and take a unified voice. Policy changes are needed, and there we amplify the type of changes that are required for us to achieve this end. Transformation is key. We will need to strengthen our scientific evidence, enhance multi-level governance, strengthen our policy instruments, enhance institutional capacity, enable lifestyle and behavioral change, starting from our universities, enable technology innovation and transfer, but most important, financial investments are key. I want to thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so very much. You've highlighted the power of partnerships, and you've shared with us your knowledge from work that has been ongoing in other dialogues. Thank you so much. There are some questions here for both of you. We start with Dr. Nadia. Dear Dr. Nadia, thank you so much for your good presentation. My question is how we can improve the resilience of our food system in Eastern Africa and increase its sustainability towards zero hunger. This question is from Mohammed. The next one, how best can we reach in African countries effective implementation of those nice recommendations and orientations presented by the speakers for robust food system? And then there is a question here, I think, which is general. How can our university be part of the discourse? Do we have to register? This is from Hilma Amwele. So I will continue with the rest of the questions, but let's tackle those. Dr. Nadia?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I will try to make an answer for some of the questions. Regarding resilience, the resilience is the way the food system adapts itself to unexpected shocks and changes. So I would say that there is no standalone solution to achieve resilience. But I think the regions, Eastern, Western, or Southern African, they should take opportunity, use the existing opportunity, for example, the increasing technology, the available assorted agricultural science and technology and innovation. So there are so many opportunities that I think are not yet fully exploited. So that is for me, a way of getting the resilience. But because the resilience is not, I mean, we will not get resilience from one solution. So we need to combine different options to get to that one. And this is a matter of time. Reach effective implementation of those recommendations, it is a matter of time. At least we are having real recommendations that are realistic and pragmatic to achieve. So let's start by this one and put one step after the other, and let's see how we are in let's say in 10 years. So over to you, Mrs. Sorry, Madam Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, my sister. Prof. Zibanda, the question here is, do you have any thoughts on the role of the academies of science to promote? Prof. Zibanda, over to you.
Chair, I totally lost you on that question. If you could just highlight it, just repeat again.
I will, no problem. Any thoughts on the role of the academies of science to promote the type of research that you have described?
Yeah, thank you very much. So there was the issue of how do we implement the recommendations. I think as universities, we've always shied away from being in the public. So one way to implement recommendations is to hold each other accountable. What I presented was presentations made by our own African vice chancellors. So let's hold them to account. Let's meet again next year. Let's not just wait for the Secretary General to convene a food systems dialogue. Let's have our own perennial platform where we say, these are the recommendations we made. Where are we as universities? And I'm speaking like this because RUFORUM is a platform for universities. Our Center of Excellence is a platform for universities. We as the University of Pretoria, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Coupe, has already booked a place for us for next year in March at the annual University of Pretoria Africa Week for us to go back and say, what were the recommendations? What have we done? So accountability is by raising a platform and bringing the messengers who brought the commitment to tell us what they've done. On the issue of the Academy of Sciences, my heart bleeds when I visit other continents and find that their laureates, their distinguished professors are in the Hall of Fame. They hold them in high regard, but generally when ours retire, we forget about them. So definitely, we have a place and a duty to make sure that our Academy of Science for Africa becomes a platform where we hang the innovations that Professor Okori was talking about, that science, technology, innovation is going to be the engine for transformation for Africa. And who are going to be our ambassadors? It's the academies of science. that will stand at global level and say, this is the Africa Academy of Science, these are our laureates, these are the technologies that we have generated. So we need to make that academy very visible. We have one, but let's raise the flag and make sure we keep our over 70s sitting in those high halls of fame, showcasing the science and the technologies they have generated.
Thank you so much. I thank you so much, Prof. A question here, maybe I should take. It has to do with last, I understand to observe food security in our continent, seed system sector has to be strengthened, especially harmonizing seed laws. So what can be done to enhance the harmonization of seed trade laws in Africa? This is coming from Tinovonga Goni. So
I will have a quick go at that one because I had the experience of participating in the harmonization of seed systems for the SADC region. And just to tell a 30-second story, it's that we came up at the time I was with FANAPAN, the Food, Agriculture, Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, and we were approached by SADC to say they want to harmonize their seed systems. What does it take? It takes research, and research should focus on what are the different seed systems, regulatory environments in the 15 SADC countries, where are the synergies and where are the points of divergence. What we came up with is that there were only 2 protocols that were causing conflict, and all the pain on harmonization was hinging on those 2. When we did the research and showcased this to politicians, they said, this is long overdue, close the chapter, let's harmonize. So what does it take? It takes evidence-based research. It takes awareness on the cost of not harmonizing. It takes a scare factor that you take to the politicians and say, by not harmonizing, this is the cost you are losing. At the time, the cost of seed business was estimated to be 4 billion for the region. And can you imagine the constraints of not harmonizing with the region losing that amount of money? So they then since harmonized, and implementation was really now about policing, compliance, and further research to support the journey. So what does it take? Good researchers, a listening policy ear, and evidence-based policy making and monitoring the policy implementation. I thank you.
thank you so much, Prof. I'll just want to at least read out a few concerns that have just come in. One of this is from Professor Linus Opara, who says, colleagues, I believe we need a new vision of agri-food systems in which those directly involved, for example, producers, farmers, can pay to access productivity enhancing technologies and finance, of course, with the support of government. Our 600 million smallholders are not able to do this. We need new crop of farmers, reduce the number of smallholders, and assist others move into non-on-farm activities on small plots. Thank you, Professor. From Stephen Onakosi, I find it very difficult to understand why we continue to talk about technology for agricultural development in many African countries. Have we forgotten that 80% of agriculture in the continent is subsistence? There is a serious disconnect between what we are preaching about technology and the realities on ground. We need to crawl before we run. And from Omahoza Ernestine, African universities should promote academic research on food security assurance in different options and take them into account when establishing and or improving existing policies. So I think, then from Otwa Haron, how best can the Vice Chancellors push forward the different recommendations to the government so as the implementation is done, and also follow up, for example, Makerere University in Uganda? So those are some of the concerns that came up. I don't know if there's any there that we actually address, or if some of them.
Yeah, I want to believe most of them were comments. However, on the interface between our universities and government and policy making, I find that most of our universities—
Most of them were just comments.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Most of our universities are state-funded universities. What that means is that within the council, within the policy and governance institution, there is representation from government. But the main thing about policy influence is that you've got to be trusted, you've got to be known, and you've got to maintain close contact and continuous engagement. It's not an overnight job, but creating that pipeline for continuous engagement. That is why having those national dialogues where universities open up to bring the community to regular policy discourse within the university grounds will create a name. It will create trust, but it will attract the policymakers to participate in those dialogues, and they will hear the messages from the research that's being done, and follow-through mechanisms become easy. So visibility, transparency, but also robust evidence generated from research is always a good conduit to influencing policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Prof. Sibanda. Thank you, Dr. Nadia. We've had brilliant presentations, and you can see from the reactions that participants are fully awake and following us up. And thank you, participants, for all your questions and your contributions. Please keep them coming. That's what we are here for. So we're going to move to the next presentations. We're going to take right away the presentation on review of draft African Universities Vice Chancellor statement to the UN Food Systems Summit. And this will be presented to us by Dr. Florence Nakayiwa, RUFORUM's Deputy Executive Secretary, Planning, Resource Mobilization, and Management. Over to you, Dr. Nakayiwa.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the excellent moderation, but also to thank the participants and the speakers that have given the information. What I'm going to present resonates with a lot of the discussions that have been articulated in this meeting, but also is a result of a process that we have engaged in since March of this year, where the first draft of the statement came out, and different vice chancellors and university participants and other actors have contributed. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, so this is the statement that will ultimately go to the to the UN Food System Summit, and we anticipate that it will go through the processes that were articulated by Professor Adipala Ekwam from the independent dialogues that we are holding. They'll go to the ministers, and then they will be escalated to the presidents, and from there it will, we assume, go to the food system, because that is the process that has been put forward to take ideas forward. So in this statement, we start with a description of what RUFORUM is all about and how we support the different frameworks at continental and national level, and the actors that drive the process. So we are looking at how the national, regional, and international partners from across the divide, the public sector, the private sector, that form the improvement of quality in higher education. And we know that it is higher education that promotes equitable development, and with the UN Sustainable Development Goal slogan of leaving no one behind. And we also want universities to develop their knowledge and skills in leaving no one behind on the continent. We articulate that COVID-19 and acknowledge that COVID-19 has been an issue, we all know, and it has affected how we as universities operate, especially changing the pivot to online delivery. And online delivery comes out with challenges, perhaps reducing the practical orientation of the programs that we have. And it is situated within the RUFORUM Agenda 2030 as well, which is the agriculture, higher education, science and technology innovation, as it were, and the mission of RUFORUM of strengthening the capacities of universities to foster innovations responsive to demands of smallholder farmers through the training of high quality researchers, the output of impact-oriented research, and the maintenance of collaborative work relations among researchers, farmers, national agricultural research institutions. This mission, ladies and gentlemen, is what we have been talking about since this dialogue began, and we underscore that this is what we do as a network. And we also articulate that RUFORUM, since inception, has been a platform for networking, resource mobilization, advocacy, and for inclusive sustainable development, as well as the rational use of resources to enhance economies of scale and scope of African universities. So this is just giving a background of how RUFORUM is situated within the general framework of operation. So we continue to say that RUFORUM Vice Chancellors acknowledge that the future transformation of Africa's food systems require innovative scientific, research, educational, and training approaches, and agree unanimously that universities must be actively engaged in the transformation process, despite the COVID challenge that has been experienced. And they agree that will act as with greater urgency for pioneering new approaches in delivering our collaborative regional educational training and research innovative programs. The statement further says that we shall build on and integrate lessons from successful initiatives, and some of these successful initiatives include the plant breeding program, which has produced some of the finest plant breeders on the continent, the dry resources management program, which has produced top-notch researchers who are focused on building resilience in smallholder farming systems in arid and semi-arid areas, and leading response and emergency assistance. These are some of the successes and achievements that we have experienced under RUFORUM, but also noting that we have had collaborative efforts for relaunching education, training, and research programs in universities and research centers in conflict and post-conflict sticking to our agenda that we have to leave no one behind. So we focus also on conflict and post-conflict countries such as Burundi, DRC, and the like. We are also proud as RUFORUM that our alumni who have received grants through the RUFORUM Scholarship Program, 97% of them remain on the continent to champion and lead agricultural research and innovation process. And our focus, even as we talk about promoting scholarship and agro-based smallholder farmers, we are focusing on women, youth, who are at the center of our shared forum agenda for food systems transformation in Africa going forward. So it has to be inclusive. So the food systems, food system entry point for universities, we recognize that there are 4 typologies that characterize Africa's food systems. We do have, as Africa, and we acknowledge this from the Vice Chancellor's statement, that there are inherent structural differences. There is a lot of openness to international trade and high reliance on imported food, as well as increased urbanization. These are the factors that were raised by Dr. Okori and Dr. Sibanda, even as they presented in the earlier sessions. So we are saying that Africa's food systems transformations post-COVID must therefore be inclusive and provide equitable opportunities for all. So we are saying, as Vice Chancellors, they will agree that the strategies, priority actions, and targets for monitoring and evaluating progress in food systems transformation in Africa must be co-designed, co-owned by African universities, but in partnerships. This is what Prof. Sibanda was talking about. Those partnerships have to be promoted if we are to promote food system transformations. And we are saying that all citizens must benefit, especially smallholder producers, fisher folk, livestock keepers, and all communities, especially women and youth. In this regard, RUFORUM, and we are proud that we have a good convening power. So we'll use its convening power, vast multidisciplinary expertise, cross-sectoral platforms, and knowledge of political, environmental, and cultural contexts to chart an African-wide food systems transformation agenda. To this end, for actions to support the Food Systems Summit 2021, RUFORUM is looking at efforts to mobilize resources for continental initiatives to support human capital development and the increase in Africa's capability in research, innovation, and entrepreneurship for the various facets that promote livelihood and development, including value additions, government support for compliance and phytosanitary processes, and leveraging the 4th industrial revolution. Secondly, we are looking at ensuring that the result of investments in university education, training, and research are put forward. Dr. Sibanda did talk about accountability. So we are looking at how do we account for the processes and investment that we have that have been made in African universities. So we are looking at an integrated and used to stimulate local and continental-wide economic recovery and socio-economic development. So, but we are also looking, as presented by Professor Adipala and Professor Okori, what are those game changers, the action tracks and game changers? So RUFORUM, as a network of universities, is looking at these game changers from a holistic, multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach, and also ensuring that indigenous knowledge and modern science and technologies are integrated into teaching, research, and the innovation agenda to overcome the challenges of Africa's food systems. So we do go ahead and articulate that for the different tracks, what are those game-changing actions that we are looking at. So in terms of game changers for ensuring access to safe and nutritious food RUFORUM universities, research and community outreach programs on indigenous vegetables and other crops, livestock and fish to reduce the burden of all forms of malnutrition as a game changer that is targeted by the member universities. And looking at how we leverage digital technologies for delivering educational informational content on food production, sustainable use of indigenous biodiversity, and nutrition-related topics. Our game changer under track number 1. Under track number 2, which is shifting to sustainable consumption, we are looking at RUFORUM universities co-developing models to analyze present and predict future consumption trends for tackling undernutrition and the growing obesity and non-communicable diseases crisis in Africa, noting the urbanization trend that we articulated earlier. Therefore, we are looking at multidisciplinary teaching and research, connecting agriculture and nutrition disciplines so that traditional African foods produced in a sustainable manner are integral, a part of the healthy, diversified diets. We have to start from our students, but also our curriculum. Then under track, action track number 3, our game changer is to build public-private producer university partnerships. This cannot be overemphasized because these partnerships are the ones that will help us deliver on the promises that we are making under the different action tracks. So we are looking at advanced science and technologies, including genomics, precision agriculture, digitization that enables smallholders and SMEs to increase productivity. Because if we don't increase productivity, then we cannot talk about consumption as it were. And then under action track number 4, game changer is to build capability of local entrepreneurs by supporting agribusiness incubation hubs that link students and faculty with the private sector, financial, government, and civil society representatives. But we are also looking at how do we make it inclusive so that the disadvantaged youth, women, refugees, and physically handicapped persons are also embraced in this full productive employment process. Then track change number 5, which is the last one, is building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stresses. And our game changer there is to advocate for increased access to reliable and affordable energy, including renewable energy, for improved production efficiency, value addition, and reducing losses in the food value chain. So those are our game changers and what we want to take to the UN Food System Summit as our points of action and points of intervention. Therefore, what are our expectations from the UN Food System Summit, even as we take these action points to the summit? The Vice Chancellors urge the summit to endorse our efforts for securing long-term and focused investments from governments and development partners to support universities to deliver high-quality tertiary education, research, innovation, and outreach programs to realize our collective agenda for food systems transformation in Africa. So we are saying that these game changers will be successful if they are powered by access to modern infrastructure, including state-of-the-art digital platforms, highly motivated faculty and students, and African universities are committed to contribute to reducing hunger and poverty, improving nutrition outcomes and incomes, as well as greater equity and environmental sustainability. Plus, looking at how resilience can be promoted, especially in communities that depend on agriculture for food and livelihoods, well knowing that this represents 80% of the population on the continent. Chair and members, I thank you. I wait for comments and inputs to this statement that we are going to be taking to the Food System Summit through the different levels. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nakaiwa, for your very clear presentation. And as you rightly say, now is the time for all of us to make our own inputs, our contributions to actually appraise these statements that will be presented to the UN Food System Summit on behalf of the Vice Chancellors of the different universities. So please, your comments, I can read right away. I think I saw a comment here that I would have loved to have lost. Let's see. The game changers are meant to reform food systems, deliver impact at scale. Many participants of the United Nations Food System Summit may not know RUFORUM and their members' track record. Hence, it may be good to include links to the examples has been passed, as this may create conflict and its members are. So just to say that links to the examples that we have seen from Professor So I think our statements. Other comments? I'm not seeing any other here, and so I take it that we all agree that this represents us, and that there's a comment here under Game Changer 3, the focus on soils. This is from David Nelson. Under Game Changer 3, the focus on soils is very welcome and important. And the African Union Commission Soils Initiative for Africa is getting underway with a lot of support within Africa of this initiative in the statements might be given consideration. Dr. Nakaiwa, did you get that?
Yes, I got it, Chair.
Okay. And then another comment here from Florence Olubayo. I wish to congratulate RUFORUM for the great efforts they have made towards our contributions as Africa to the United Nations Food Systems Summit. And another one from El Mogera Mo, well-prepared document. Congratulations for this excellent work. The
Prof, maybe you can close your video to try to improve the quality of the connection.
It is very clear. Disconnected, but I'm back. Apart from the two suggestions to include the links to the examples that have been cited there, I think we're good to go with the statement. Thank you very much, Dr. Nakaiwa, and once more, RUFORUM Secretariat. Thank you for a job well done. Another comment here, well thought out and well written statement from Margaret Hutchinson. So thank you very much. So if you permit me, we'll move on to our last item on the agenda, which is to be presented by 3 panelists. And this is a wrap-up of emerging issues and next steps. So we'll essentially give 5 minutes to each person. We are not doing badly on time. So we begin with Ms. Judith Ann Francis of IAP, member from Trinidad and Tobago, to begin the wrap up, and this is to be followed by Jenny van der Meulen, IAP member from Wageningen University and Research, Netherlands. And I think the third will be coming from Ms. Alice of the RUFORUM, of RUFORUM. So Ms. Judith Ann Francis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Are you hearing me? Okay, good. So, Madam Chair, I just wanted one correction. I'm no longer the Executive Secretary. Jenny van der Meulen, who speaks after me, took over that role last year, September. I'm very happy to be part of this process. And what I did is I prepared some brief slides and added in some comments as the session went along. So I'm going to share my screen. So what we heard very well is that the community is pleased with the draft statement and the emerging issues, and I've captured it in terms of investments in human capital development. And this is the strength of RUFORUM and its coalition. Investments in human capital development for quality teaching, research, outreach, and innovation. Under Game Changer 1, we are committing to the co-design around an integrated food systems transformation. Again, this comes back to Dr. Okoru, and Dr. Florence also mentioned it. And the tools, the sharing of tools, research methods, all of these things that RUFORUM is known for in terms of making sure that the impact is there in the future. Something else that came out very clearly is this whole issue of Africa research, teaching centers of excellence, science academies, and African leadership. And I think going forward, this is one of the things we want to make sure that the whole transformation agenda is driven by African leadership. And this comes back to the centers of excellence and the whole sharing of knowledge. On the Game Changer 2, the focus again on African diets, understanding dietary diversity, indigenous, and the whole role in the nutrition change agenda and the need for new models. Under Game Changer 3, we mentioned the whole issue of public-private producer university partnerships. But the focus is, since we've already identified there are multiple types of food systems, that we need to zero in and focus the research and teaching to embrace the smallholder farming systems and the issue of leveraging advances in science, technologies, including artificial intelligence, for production, processing, and food distribution. One of the things that we did discuss, but which needs to be considered, is the whole issue around intellectual property rights, ethical issues in terms of the Africa's indigenous resources, etc. Under track 4, one of the things that came out again, and which we need to take forward, building on RUFORUM's comparative advantage and experiences across the universities, is the whole issue of agribusiness, innovation hubs, multi-stakeholder platforms. And when we came to the issue of resilience to vulnerability shocks, one of the things is renewable energy is a priority. Electrification is a priority, especially if we're going to address post-harvest losses. The issue of insurance came up, and the issue of the science policy interface, which Dr. Sabanda, Prof. Sabanda, focused on, and she gave the example of the harmonization of seed policies and lessons in terms of how we address the political economy issues and greater participation of universities. So in terms of next steps, how I see the next steps, and which I understand what will be taken forward, is that we are going to take the feedback from today's session from the VCs and from follow-up meetings to refine the agenda, the statement. All the people have already said that they approve it. We need to circulate it for further approval by the VCs, submit it, and then the issue of accountability. How do we account for this investment in human capital development, actually supporting the food transformation change that we want to see for jobs? So it's not only about the research and the teaching, etc. The jobs, livelihoods, the end of poverty, reduction in malnutrition, and so I thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, RUFORUM, and all the participants.
Thank you so much.
Jenny, you're still muted.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just, I seem to have lost you for a while. Thank you so very much, Ms. Judith and Francis. I understand that I didn't rush you through. I'm sorry. So you could always come back later if there's something to add. So now invite Janie.
Thank you very much, Prof. Theresia.
Thank you.
I do not have a PowerPoint. I would just like to highlight a few other things with the participants. So far, we have talked about contents, but if I would like to take you back to what the UN Food Systems Summit is, as Prof. Adipala started also in his introduction. Normally, a UN summit is a summit that is attended by member states. This one is very special, and it is the UN Secretary General who said, the way things are going right now, we will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and so we need to make pay special attention to the food systems transformation. So this year's summit is also, in addition to the normal member state summit, there's also a lot of attention to the food systems. What will typically happen during a UN summit is there will be statements, there will be commitments. And so the question is, what is going to happen with everything that we, many thousands of people, are preparing as statements in this whole process leading up to the summit? And how, as Prof. Adipala said in the beginning, how we can move from statements to commitments and also try to lobby for actions, solutions in which RUFORUM and the members can play an important role. So as Judith and others, we are members of the IAP, the International Advisory Panel of RUFORUM. We are trying to use the information that we can get about this extremely complex process. So now, this afternoon, we have all talked about contents, and all the participants, I think we all agree this is a very, very important topic. So we haven't had to defend ourselves in a way that this is an important topic. We all agree. So we immediately delve into the how. What is important? We don't have to say about how that this is a crucial topic, but if you put yourselves in New York, there are policymakers, there are funders, there are all kinds of people who have to decide on where to put their money. So that is a very different ball game. Now, what, for example, we have heard is in preparing for the UN Food Systems Summit in New York, there is going to be a pre-summit in Rome. And one of the things that the IAP would like to follow up also with the RUFORUM Secretariat is how we could influence maybe decisions that are taken in Rome by the permanent representatives of all your countries also. It could be, but the process is complex. So we need to all put our knowledge into or share all our knowledge and information with the RUFORUM Secretariat and see what we know about this process. But it might be that the process in Rome is crucial to ensure that the information that the RUFORUM and the members want to convey is taken to the summit in New York. and that you get a place into the statement and into follow-up actions. For this, it will be crucial to have a very clear message that will be repeated over and over again, not only by the permanent representatives of your embassies in Rome, but also by your ministers and the presidents, the delegations going to New York. As the International Advisory Panel of RUFORUM, we look forward further discussing this with the RUFORUM Secretariat. And please, all participants know that this is a complex process. So if you happen to be in touch with your ministers, delegations, attending the summit or attending the pre-summit in Rome, end of July, I think it is very important to share that information so that we can all collate it and then decide on, also help RUFORUM decide what is the best way forward. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Jeannie, for always playing your advisory role so well. You know, you're an asset to RUFORUM. Thank you so much, Ms. Judith and Francis. We've taken the message loud and clear that the information that RUFORUM wants to convey should be clear and will be taken to the summit. That's what we are all working at, and I am sure we'll get there with the advice that we always have readily coming from you. So I read here, I agree with the speaker from Jamaica that there is room for, I'm sure you must mean from Trinidad, that there is room for fine-tuning the RUFORUM statement in light of the contributions that have been made today by the various participants. Well noted. Congratulations, well presented. And I think we need to collaborate and share knowledge to enhance the outcomes. Coming from Adam Bush, the former comment was from Pardon Cuba. So I think that we've done very well. The contributions have been very enriching. Our panelists did an excellent job. I'm sure you all will agree with me. And above all, we have managed time fantastically. It's been a 3-hour meeting, but look like 3 minutes. It's gone so fast, but yet very fruitful. So I'm going to, at this moment, call on Professor Adibala for his closing remarks. And RUFORUM, thank you once more for giving me this opportunity. It's been an honor to be the moderator for this session. Thank you.
Madam Chair of this event, this session, our distinguished panelists, our distinguished participants, mine is simply to say thank you very, very much for your participation. We have listened closely and taken note of the suggestions and recommendations. We will try to share this and improve on the statement from the Vice Chancellor. So we shall share back the document with the Vice Chancellors. And secondly, the next key step is to pick up the key issues and present them to the technocrats from the different member states. That will be what will take place on 27th of this month. And we shall be coming back to you for consultations. We shall share with you the presentation, and we shall invite you for other engagements. So thank you very, very much for this very, very engaging event. And Chair, thank you for managing the time excellently well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.